Good evening, everybody. The Music Fan is back, bringing smiles to the faces, knowledge to the people, and, of course, music to the masses. And it is unbearably hot tonight. You know that it is a summer night in Massachusetts when it is 9 o'clock and it's still 85 degrees out. But I'm going to try to push through, I'm going to try to persevere, and hopefully no sweat gets into my eyes. So anyways, I am, of course, back with another Are You In? And tonight we are taking a look at the newest Baroness album entitled Gold and Grey. Baroness is a sludge metal, progressive metal, alt metal band from Savannah, Georgia, with members including John Baisley on lead vocals, rhythm guitar, keyboards, and percussion, Nick Jost on bass, keyboards, and additional backing vocals, Sebastian Thompson on drums, and Gina Gleason on lead guitar and backing vocals. Previous albums include Red Album in 2007, Blue Record in 2009, Yellow and Green in 2012, and Purple in 2015. Now, Baroness is a band that I've heard a lot about in the metal scene, but have never given a listen to. And I was making sure that this time around, I definitely would. However, I was a little bit mixed because of just the polarizing reviews that I have seen. First one being the Anthony Fantano review on it, and he gave it a pretty mediocre score because of the overall production, not necessarily the quality of the songs. Though he also did say that a lot of these songs were more anthemic. A line that I love about it is like, as if Foo Fighters would write metal anthems, I guess, to paraphrase that. But however, Pitchfork gave it a very strong review, talking about the overall diversity in sound and just how interesting of a dive this album was. So, of course, I was very torn. Would I favor more of Anthony Fantano or would I favor more of Pitchfork? Now, before I dive into the meat of this album, one other thing I want to say is, of course, I'm going to give my opinions of both the music and the lyrics, but I would be remiss to not talk about the Kerrang! Interview with John Baisley, where he went over each track and just how they made it, as well as what he hears from these songs, the influences that got him to where these songs were created. And I found it overall really fascinating. Not only that he knows where his place is in metal, but also just the influences that he can just spout off, going from David Bowie to composer Steve Reich to all these rock and classical and even atonal influences that I find very fascinating. So it's really cool to not only find someone who loves music, but also appreciates where his music came from. I'll put a link to that interview in the description. But the bigger takeaway from this is he talked about that there were basically 3 sides to this album, so I'm going to review it the same way. First off, we're going to talk about side A, which comprises Front Towards Enemy, I'm Already Gone, Seasons, Sevens, Tourniquet, and Anchor's Lament. This being my first dive into this band, what I come away with in this first half is the more heavy sounds of this band. What also fascinates me is not just the progressive ideas that they use, but also just how atmospheric some of these songs become. The best way I can describe it is the atmosphere of, like, say, a Fleet Foxes or even a Manchester Orchestra. This very, like, Appalachia, very mountain kind of atmosphere, and even in metal songs. I find it very fascinating. It probably has to do with the way that this album is mixed in a way. It's really interesting to hear that type of atmosphere on a metal album. When I think sludge, of course I think more Mastodon, I think more of the last Alice in Chains album before Lane Staley passed. Those more sludgy and slower and heavier stuff. And it is here, but there is a little bit more beauty to it. So, first things first, Front Towards Enemy, a great opener. It kicks off with so much energy. Sebastian Thompson is one of the MVPs on this album because of just how intense and how active his drum work is, and it definitely shows on a song like this. I also love the guitar lines, the low guitar lines on here, and just the fast-paced nature of this. It just honestly goes by so quickly, but leaves a great impression. The other 3 songs that are not interludes, which we'll talk about in a second, are Seasons, Tourniquet, and I'm Already Gone. Tourniquet and Seasons are two of the highlights for me on this album. Again, the drum work on Seasons, this one makes it feel like a journey because it continuously goes through different feels. The first one, it has this like backbeat feel, kind of like Weird Fishes / Arpeggi from Radiohead, but it has a little bit more of the drum kit in there rather than just the cymbals in there. I find that really interesting, and then it goes into this more flowing 6/8 feel and keeps adding different layers throughout this whole entire song, which makes up for the somewhat uninteresting melody lines, but the guitar work also becomes more interesting because of what is flowing throughout this drum work. Such a really cool journey to go on. Then Tourniquet kind of adds to that appeal of the more Fleet Fox ideas, where the beginning of it is more mellow, more acoustic, and the vocals on there feel more mountainous, feel more open, but then eventually gets into this 10/4 groove that is really solid. Even still, the vocals kind of have that more open and mountainous approach to them. So it makes for this lovely, lovely melody, as well as one of the best choruses on the album. I will say, like, approaching to the bridge, it does get a little bit weird. The experiment doesn't necessarily get to where it wants to be, but phenomenal song. And what I love also is the drum work at the end on the crashes, this like different idea and rhythm comparatively to the 10/4. I'm Already Gone, another really solid song on this part of the album. It feels a little bit like A Perfect Circle's Blue, just in the drum work as well as just the more minimal guitar work. But this is a little bit heavier, and it does have a little bit more beauty. It does have some triangle hits as well as like some other just instrumentation that builds this to be a more complete song than Blue was. And I love Blue, but I'm Already Gone, even though it doesn't have the most amazing melody, is a very interesting song to listen to. The other two songs, Sevens and Anchor's Lament, both interludes, and there's a lot of interludes on this album, each to their own effect. I will say with Sevens and Anchor's Lament, they are some of the better interludes. Sevens is this really cool overlaying piano interlude where there's so many different piano parts and they're just all mixing together, which is really, really cool, kind of like an atonal-ish kind of arrangement, but doesn't feel too dissonant. Anchor's Lament, though, is this kind of like haunting song that bridges Tourniquet with Throw Me an Anchor. It's haunting because it has this piano part and then vocals, but none of them really match up in a consonant way. Eventually you do get these string parts as well that also add to it, signaling the end of side A. Overall, to me, the best side, just with the solidness of all the 4 main songs on here, and even some of the better interludes. Going into the next part, we get a little bit softer and more experimental, though it doesn't start that way. It actually starts off with Throw Me an Anchor, and this is where I would say the production parts come into play that get a little bit annoying. Throw Me an Anchor feels really tinny in terms of a song. The compression on it is not great, and it feels like that throughout the whole entire song. It has great energy, and it has a great chorus, but the problem I have is just it's almost impossible to listen to because of just how compressed, and it gets worse at the end of the song when it's just the drums and you can just hear how compressed it sounds. It doesn't work as a song. However, the rest of side B works pretty well. So it is Throw Me an Anchor, I'd Do Anything, Blankets of Ash, Emmet, Radiating Light, and Cold-Blooded Angels. Other than the interlude, which honestly is one of the worst ones on the album, it doesn't really do much. It does have some motion and it does have some interesting harmonies, but again, it's another one that's really compressed weirdly. And honestly, a couple of these songs have a little bit of that compression that's like sneaking in, but luckily doesn't destroy these songs. I Do Anything is this piano ballad at first until you get some guitar in there. What I love is, again, it feels a little bit more mountain, it feels a little bit more Appalachia, and I love the harmonies on here. Gina Gleason, I found out, was a new member to this band, and adding her to this band gives this album so much more depth. If you had just Baisley singing I Do Anything, I don't think it would work, but Gina's harmonies on there, fantastic. That compression does start to sneak in at the end, but not enough to make it annoying. Emmett Radiating Light is a really cool song. It has these very dissonant parts, and it feels like they were trying to make an atonal acoustic song. And I find it really interesting. The harmonies eventually down the line are really cool. It's a slow build, and I love just how the guitar interacts with this really weird melody. Again, there's a little bit of compression eventually, but overall, still a really cool song. And then Cold-Blooded Angels feels like it's going to start off as another one of these acoustic songs, albeit a more faster pace acoustic song. But then it eventually starts building to a more metal song, which gets us back into side C. I love this arrangement. I love the build of it. I love the melody on there, as well as like the half-step approaches to the chords. And it does eventually change into a faster and heavier song, which I find really interesting. And I also really enjoy the drums on this. Even though it is minimal at the beginning, the drums themselves have so much life. Now we get to side C, which has a majority of the rest of the interlude songs. So we'll get over those real quickly. But side C comprises of Crooked Mile, Broken Halo, Canascura, Borderlines, Assault on East Falls, and Pale Sun. The last 6 songs in the album. Interludes, Crooked Mile, honestly a throwaway to me. It's this song that has like this slide guitar that's getting detuned and retuned, not worth the time. Canascura, pretty cool. I love just the beat of it, and it feels like a little bit more has gone into that than some of the others. And Assault on East Falls is very interesting in just the approach to it. It's very atmospheric, it's very electric. It's just like very open and very meditative. Real quick, kind of a tangent. If you remember my review of Zealand Arter's Stranger Fruit from last year, these like interludes kind of remind me of some of the work on Zealand Arter. These more beautiful and more minimalist approaches to counterbalance the heaviness of the music that they created. Now, bear in mind, side B does have a lot more later stuff, but I think a lot of the interludes are interesting because of just the style differences comparatively to the rest of the album. Now going back to the other 3 songs, Broken Halo, Pale Sun, and Borderlines. Borderlines, let's get that out of the way, my favorite song on the album. Yes, it is simplistic. However, I think this is where both Gina and Sebastian shine, because the drum work is fantastic, the harmonies and the overall chorus is just so powerful. And that doesn't include the melody and the harmony there that are just solid as well. Overall, fantastic melody and harmony that make up for a pretty simplistic arrangement. But I'll also say that the guitar lines, solid as hell as well, making for truly my favorite song on the album. Broken Halo, alright, it's another one that gets kind of downgraded because of the compression, but it's a solid song that isn't just really memorable for me. But Pale Sun is a very interesting closer. It is one that is hard for me to explain. There's so much like interesting melody parts, but there's also these interesting electronic parts. It makes for a really weird closer, and not honestly one of my favorite ones from this year, but I do still enjoy a lot of this journey. Now, I also will agree with Anthony Fantano that the compression does sometimes become a problem on this album, though I don't think it's as much as he believes it is. Bear in mind, I only listen to these albums on my laptop or with like earbuds, so I don't have the same setup as he does. So it doesn't honestly become a problem to me. However, I do see where it does become a problem. Lyrically, a lot of this album is talking about either the changing of time on songs like Cold-Blooded Angels, as well as Seasons, or it's talking about relationships, healthy as well as parasitic relationships. Songs like Throw Me an Anchor, songs like I'd Do Anything, Broken Halo, I'm Already Gone, and Tourniquet. All of them dealing with love lost, feeling pain, all these things. The couple that are interesting to me, Friend Towards Enemies is talking about the perseverance of fighting for another day, both literally and metaphorically. I think Borderlines has some very interesting ideas about the duality of our brain and bipolar disorder. Emit radiating light, if I'm reading correctly, is a very interesting idea of life and death and wanting to be there for someone after you've died, but realizing that you can't be there, but hoping one day that you guys will meet again. Overall, not the most interesting lyrics, but what I love about this album is just the journey that I was able to go on. Yes, there are some weaker parts. Yes, the compression does get a little bit grating at times, and the interludes aren't always interesting, making for a 17-track, almost an hour length of material, kind of hard to digest. However, if you have the time, it is a solid metal album, one of my favorites of the year so far, and has a lot of really interesting layers to it. This sandwich of heavy, light, heavy, really cool, and I would definitely listen to it again. So my rating, if the compression wasn't the way it is, I would say put on repeat. But because of how it is, I'm going to say listen to the full album. I'm glad that I took a look at this album, and I really am curious to go back and hear the other albums, because I hear that they're just as unique and interesting as this one. But that is my time. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you like or hate this album and the reasons why. Share this with your friends. Let me know of other albums from 2019 that you would like me to review. And finally, and most importantly, subscribe to this channel. That way I know that you are interested in what I'm doing and want to see more of content like this. This is The Music Fan, and I'm signing off.